The night Claire Whitman handed her credit card to a stranger, she never imagined it would change her life. It started as a joke at a charity gala in Boston, where wealthy donors gathered to outbid each other for causes they would forget by morning. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? When Daniel Brooks approached the registration table and was quietly turned away for lacking the minimum donation, Claire watched with the amusement of someone who had never been denied anything. On impulse, she slid her platinum card across the table toward him. 24 hours, she said loud enough for her friends to hear. Spend whatever you want. Daniel took the card without a word. Without gratitude, without even meeting her eyes. He simply nodded once and walked out into the cold. Claire Whitman had grown up in a world where money was as invisible as air. Her father built a commercial real estate empire across New England, and by the time she turned 30, her trust fund generated more interest in a month than most families earned in a year. She never thought about prices, never checked balances, never experienced that particular anxiety that comes from watching numbers dwindle towards zero. Money to Claire was simply there like gravity or sunlight, a force that required no attention because it never threatened to disappear. Her apartment overlooking the Charles River cost more monthly than a teacher's annual salary, but she rarely considered this. The gala that evening was for children's literacy, though she couldn't remember the specific organization. She attended because her social circle attended, because the photographs would appear in Boston Magazine, because refusing would require an explanation she didn't care to give. The $100 minimum donation was pocket change hardly worth noticing. So when she saw the man at the registration table, heard the hushed exchange as he was informed of the requirement, watched him stand frozen with embarrassment before the gatekeeper, something in her flickered, not sympathy, not quite cruelty either. Something more complicated, a desire to prove a point she couldn't quite articulate, a need to demonstrate the vast distance between her world and his. "Let me handle this," she'd said, approaching with champagne in hand. Her friends watched from nearby, already smiling at whatever entertainment was about to unfold. She remembered the way Daniel looked at her then, the brief assessment in his eyes before his expression went carefully blank. He was tall, perhaps 35, with the weathered hands of someone who worked outdoors. His suit was clearly borrowed, slightly too large in the shoulders. "Take it," she insisted when he hesitated. "Think of it as a social experiment, 24 hours to spend." Like the other half-lives, her friends laughed. Someone made a comment about Pretty Woman in reverse. Claire felt the warm glow of being the center of attention, of performing generosity that cost her nothing emotionally, even if the monetary amount was theoretically limitless. The card was tied to an account with no preset spending limit. Her father's accounting team monitored it for fraud, not excess. She assumed Daniel would buy a decent suit, a fancy meal, perhaps a hotel room for the night. She expected a story, something amusing to recount over brunch tomorrow, about how the poor man bought 3 pairs of shoes and a steak dinner. The first alert came at 11:17 p.m. as her car glided back toward Beacon Hill. A notification on her phone, 4,072.50 at Massachusetts General Hospital. She stared, puzzled. Not a purchase, a payment, a copay perhaps for something serious. The frivolous night she'd envisioned shifted slightly, a tremor in the narrative. The next was at 6:02 a.m., 9,455 zeta, to a company called Safe Haven Security Systems. Then in rapid succession, 2,300s in gift cards from a grocery chain, 8,200s to a local utility company, and boom, 500 to the Boston Public Library. By 9 a.m., as she sipped her espresso, the notifications were a cascade. He wasn't spending, he was paying. He was erasing debts, not acquiring things. $25,000 to a funeral home in Dorchester, $3,200 for veterinary services, $15,000 in tuition payments to a community college. Claire's amusement curdled into a cold, gnawing anxiety. This wasn't the experiment. This was an audit. Each transaction was a window into a life of relentless pressure, a ledger of hardships she had only ever theorized. He wasn't living like the other half. He was trying to keep its roof from collapsing. Her phone began to ring. Her father's CFO, Mark, sounded strained. "Claire, we're seeing highly unusual activity. We've paused the card. Do you want to press charges?" She looked out at the grey river, the world feeling suddenly sharp-edged and real. "No," she heard herself say. "No charges." She spent the day in a strange purgatory, refreshing the frozen statement. The final tally, before the card was frozen, was 147,892.11. Not a fortune, to her, but a seismic sum in the world he inhabited. He had not bought a single thing for himself that she could see. Every dollar was a lifeline thrown to someone else. She felt exposed, as if her careless gesture had been turned into a mirror. And she saw not her generosity, but her profound, insulated ignorance. The story did not end at brunch. Daniel Brooks found her a week later, not for gratitude, but for accountability. He waited outside her building, the same borrowed suit now seemingly a armor. He handed her a manila envelope. Inside was not money, he had none, but a document. A list of every transaction, every recipient with contact information. "So you can verify it," he said, his voice low and steady. It wasn't stolen. It was allocated. Claire learned his story in fragments, pieced together from the list and a subsequent painfully awkward coffee. He was a former EMT, now a construction worker, living in a triple-decker in South Boston. The hospital bill was for his niece. The security system for his elderly neighbor who had been burglarized. The utility payments were for families in his building facing shut-off. The funeral was for a co-worker's child. He had been at the gala that night trying to network, to find a donor for a community center for kids, a fact that made Claire's stomach twist. Her joke had been his desperate opportunity. The change was not immediate, but it was total. Claire's life of invisible money was over. Now she saw its weight, its texture, its power to crush or to lift. She quietly had her father's team pay off the remaining balances on the card. Then she began to dismantle her own existence. She moved to a smaller apartment. She took a job at the very community center Daniel had championed. She learned about budgets, about grant proposals, about the real cost of a warm meal for a child. The vast distance she had wanted to demonstrate that night remained, but she was the one who had crossed it. Daniel, wary and proud, eventually became a colleague, then a friend. He never thanked her for the money, not in words. But one day, watching her struggle to fix a leaking faucet in the center's kitchen, he took the wrench from her hand, their fingers brushing, a silent, solid understanding passing between them. The night Claire Whitman handed her credit card to a stranger, she thought she was writing a punchline. Instead, she was given a new language, a new set of eyes, a new life, where money was no longer invisible but a tangible tool, and where the greatest wealth she would ever know had nothing to do with her trust fund, and everything to do with the weight of a wrench in her hand, and the hard, beautiful work of building something real. If you were moved by this story of unexpected transformation, please show your support for more content like this by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to my channel Kindness True Stories, where every narrative is a step toward a more compassionate world.